Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whenever you find a way to watch this podcast. Is me, Omar again. And after a quick turnaround, last podcast was just so great. I had him back again, Cuthbert of SSN Army, coming to discuss I guess a couple of Army games in the future in terms of broad TV broadcasting, and also as well a little bit of like ACC talk will be thrown into there, I guess, in terms of the marketability of some of the teams. But Cuthbert, thanks for coming back on in such a short notice and quick turnaround.
Hey, always happy to be here, Omar. Love the hardware pod. Love everything that you do with red shirts. And when you're able to get your work out there, I love reading it and seeing the things that you're, what do they say, Xing now or twexting or whatever it is. I don't know. But I'm always happy to be here, man. I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to have you on. So let's dive into the topic for this week. And we're in football season. I mean, you don't need anyone to tell you like football season in full swing. Another sign of that, something that I always look forward to on a Monday, coming back from the weekend, starting the week, is the TV assignments for 12 days in advance. As each Monday, conferences designate which games are on what network/streaming services for the week after that Monday. So 12 days in advance. And so this Monday, I was particularly excited because the Army had Syracuse on September 23rd, the first meeting since 1996. Just really a big event for Northeast football that people aren't talking about enough. Sad that that's the state of Northeast football nowadays. But I was excited because I figured that Army-Syracuse would be getting, and I wasn't asking for much, would be getting the CW treatment. And for those of you that are unaware, the CW is now broadcasting ACC games, which is honestly great for the conference because it gives the ACC another nationally televised game potentially. They can have a week where they have one game on ABC at 3:30 and then the nightcap on the CW, and it's not even like the best game that's on CW. It's maybe like some schools that don't really get much network TV appearances. But I thought Army would get the CW treatment, but no, instead they've been relegated to the ACC network, back to cable TV, no network TV appearances. And Army this year, Army's really kind of gotten a bad deal in terms of TV exposure, as the Air Force game is on CBS Sports Network this year. I think that was a decision made by the organizers since the game is in Denver, Colorado, and uh a CBS appearance would probably make that a 10 a.m. kickoff. But that's another topic. But Army not being on the CW but on the ACC network, what are your initial thoughts, Cuthbert?
I mean, I think it would have been really cool to be on the CW just because we are sort of a little bit of an underdog outsider program. And so I think it's a fantastic talking point and just sort of a lot of fun. Sort of the way I joke sometimes on Twitter that I would love for us to go to the Bahamas Bowl, even though it's the lowliest of all the bowls. It's just so ridiculous. It would be, just a sort of a bucket list thing. Um, and to a lesser extent, I think probably playing a game on the CW might be that way. I'm fine that we're on the ACC network. I think at least I think about myself as a relatively casual college football fan, and I don't watch a lot of games on um, conference networks. The Big Ten Network or the Pac-12 or whatever. SEC a little bit. That's mostly just because of the notoriety of their schools, and my hope that whoever is favored to win the game will lose. But so I don't really have a lot of experience with the ACC network. It's not a channel that I will regularly check on Saturdays. But then again, neither is the CW. So I don't really have a complaint there. I know that you were having a discussion on Twitter earlier this week with some other folks in the Army Twitterverse, and they were talking about how the ACC network, even though it's cable and not national broadcast, it actually is better because of distribution and I don't know, casual fans and things like that. I don't know enough to say have an opinion on that discussion. So, I'm kind of up in the air about it. It doesn't bother me, it doesn't excite me. It's just, I wish we were on CBS Sports. We're the away team, so we take what we can get.
Exactly. I agree with the take what you can get because like that's really all you can do at this point. But just like my first point, which like this week, the undisputed game of the week is the Virginia Military Institute will be playing NC State on the CW. And I say that half joking. Well, actually, I'd say that probably 30% joking, 70% serious, which I think this is just a great opportunity for a school like VMI in the Southern Conference in FCS, one winning season since 1981. To have a chance like that is a team that'll have more television exposure than a lot of Power Five schools will this weekend. And just hearing that and seeing the next week where Army, a team that has had more than one winning season over the past 41 years, a lot more, just get passed over by the CW is kind of disappointing because quite literally, I guess, it kind of shows that they let anyone really play on the CW, I guess. But the thing is, like, I know the big talking point with the CW game from this past weekend, Pitt and Cincinnati was it'll be available in 100% of American homes. No need for YouTube TV, which I mean, I guess from an economic standpoint, from what I learned, it's a barrier to entry, where YouTube TV I think it's $75 now. I stopped counting after the first price raise. As a YouTube TV subscriber, that's like $75. Hulu Live TV, and then God forbid cable at this point too. All those have various entry. The CW, I mean, that's right on your TV. All you have to do is get an antenna for a one-time purchase, which is just great exposure for schools like VMI and Army, who usually have games on cable and streaming. But that being said, I mean, people are still gonna watch. I feel like maybe in my head I'm kind of overblowing the growth in, I guess, people watching Army-Syracuse than I guess than now with the game being on ACC network. I feel like there won't be a loss in viewership. I feel like we're just losing the opportunity to gain a lot more viewers. But that being said, like you said, you take what we can get when we're on the road, and it's not in our control.
Well, and I would like to think that if Army was 2-0 and maybe favored to win against UTSA, maybe we would have gotten a better draw from the ACC. I mean, the other noon games that are going to be on the 23rd, we've got Florida State Clemson, which I I guess. I mean, I love big games at noon. I'm an Army fan. I love noon kick, um, just in general. But I guess it's just looking like Clemson is not the team that maybe people thought they were going to be, or the team of the recent past. But even with FSU sort of buoying them, these are the two big dogs of the ACC. They're still getting a noon kickoff on ESPN1. Not that if Army was 2-0 and favored against UTSA, we would be getting ESPN1 treatment, but we might be getting ESPN2 treatment when you've got Virginia Tech versus Marshall. Obviously, Virginia Tech is a huge TV market. I'm from Virginia originally. They have a very, very large presence in Virginia in terms of their ratings and their viewership. And then, Virginia Tech Marshall, it's not exactly a rivalry, but Virginia Tech and West Virginia schools in general have always been much more heated than, say, a UVA and the West Virginia schools. So, I think it's reasonable that we got the ACC network, and you take your lumps and hopefully we win the game.
I mean, I agree. I think it's interesting you brought up the 12 o'clock game, which if we're doing a hypothetical scenario, where I guess if the CW did pick this game, I don't think it would be a noon kick because I don't think you want to overshadow pretty much the game of the week for your conference. I don't think that I mean that's bad business by the ACC, and that's a not the smartest thing to do per se. So I mean I think we'd probably be looking at a 3:30 kickoff, which I mean, like you said, we can play the what if game all the time. One thing that is certain is this week's game that the CW picked, Georgia Tech at Wake Forest. Like it's not a bad game, but for me, with it, and maybe I'm just saying this as a homer. For me, you have Army, an arguably more of a national brand than Georgia Tech or Wake Forest, where Georgia Tech and Wake Forest, most people just associate them with just being a Power Five team in a conference, like not much great success. They're not a blue blood of college football. I mean, Army is, representative of the military, and most casual college football fans don't realize that it's a military academy. They think it's the actual Army's football team. And then also too, I just think that the CW in trying to establish their product, I think for them to pass up on two teams with a vested interest in the New York City market, I think that's bad for business. I mean, especially early on, where I read something where Syracuse has 53,000 alumni in the New York City metro. and then Army's an hour away from Manhattan. So you have the local fandom then, uh, and local media coverage in New York City. So that's just that's my perception on that move. I definitely think that they could have and should have taken a chance on the Black Knights.
It is really interesting, especially with Syracuse's relative rise to prominence of the last few years. I they've a little bit had that sort of, they're a year away from being a year away, not for a national championship, but just in terms of their program coming back up. It definitely had some down years. Army-Syracuse, like, it's not a rivalry, but this is absolutely a regional game, with implications in the state of New York, and all those silly lists on Twitter and Facebook about best team in every state and things like that. I definitely think there's bragging rights. If Syracuse beats Army, I think they probably say to themselves, "We're supposed to beat Army." But if Army wins this game, this is a big deal for Army fans. So I am surprised that they weren't able, or didn't think to try and leverage it to be a little bit more than that. But then again, you know, college football in the Northeast is not what it is in the Southeast or even the Midwest. You once you get north of, almost the Mason-Dixon line, all of a sudden you really start going into NFL territory, as opposed to when you're, in the deep South and you're in Alabama and you're in Mississippi and places like that. The NFL is great. Obviously, the NFL is big, but it's nothing compared to college football. So it may be that even though it's sort of a New England regional empire state, a game of significance, generally speaking, college football is not moving the needle in that area the same way it would in another part of the country.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I guess they always say it's like better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Not that CW doesn't know Syracuse or Raycom, the people producing these broadcasts for the CW. It's just that Georgia Tech and Wake Forest are, I guess, intertwined more into the ACC brand, like you say, like being those Southern schools, especially Wake Forest being a original member of the ACC back in the 50s, and Georgia Tech being a member of the ACC for, as long as we can remember, like not an original member, but they've been in the ACC for a while. So, when you think I'm sure a lot of people when they associate Syracuse, they think about Big East. So that also could be part of it too. And Raycom has, just as long a tradition of broadcasting games for the ACC as the ACC is old. I guess as old as the ACC is. So, I think that's a good point to be made as well. With the sort of regional difference. But again, like New York City, it's still king when it comes to media exposure, especially if you're, trying to decide which game to show for your conference. But yeah, Atlanta is a pretty big market too, but we all know that for this time being, like, it's not, Georgia's not Georgia Tech country, Atlanta's not Georgia Tech country, Atlanta is Bulldog country. Until I guess Georgia cools off. So yeah.
Well, I don't know. Watching them last week, they might be cooling a little faster than they want the world to think. That's another topic for another show. But I'm not going to say they're like out of it for the national championship or the playoff or anything like that, because obviously they are still fantastic. Even Alabama losing to Texas, that doesn't necessarily mean that their season is over. But I will say that just as a quick aside, I'm not sure that Georgia is the world beater in 2023 that they were in 2022, but that's far afield.
That's fair. But yeah, I agree. But I think we can also say that Georgia Tech is still like miles away from every county of Georgia.
Yes,
Georgia.
yes, yes.
Since Georgia Tech is playing Wake Forest, they're still miles away. No matter how big their market is. But that
And
being said,
I love Wake. I love these little private schools like Wake and Duke. I love these schools. I love when Army plays them, but it's like you said, Wake Forest is what, like 4K undergrad, 5K undergrad. You know what I mean? It's not a major market in any way. You know what I mean? And then Georgia Tech, who is positioned in a major market, does not have that fan base relative to the Dogs.
Yeah, and also too, like I mean, from a star power aspect, I don't think a lot of people in the country realize who's playing quarterback for Wake Forest because Sam Hartman's gone. That household name is gone for Wake Forest. Like I don't, I mean that's also another aspect that takes away from their marketability. I mean, as Sam Hartman
If
is now
if
Notre
he was
Dame's.
still there, if he was still there and
Yeah,
they were, they were on pace for another 10 or 11 win season and he's going to go pro, that's one thing, but it's just like you said, he goes to Notre Dame, God bless him, he looks like he's doing really well over there, and now I have no idea who the Wake Forest quarterback is.
I honestly had to look it up because I haven't seen either Wake Forest games. It's I think it's Mason Mitch Mitch Griffiths, who's having a nice year himself. That's not an insult to him.
Huh?
5 touchdowns, one pick, 500 yards. But yeah, that just
Hey,
adds
good
to it.
on him. That's a through 2 games. I would take that for an Army quarterback any day, so long as he's
Exactly.
not throwing more than about 12 times a game.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, it felt like they threw like 30 times a game last week with the passing output. I mean,
Oh
that
yeah, yeah. I figure we're gonna get to that because there is like, look, that was a great game to watch. I needed that for my sanity, for my fandom, but it's like we can't like, all right, everybody, cool it. Like, look, all the respect in the world to Delaware State for bringing their guys up, for showing up. I don't think they had any quit in them. I got a ton of respect for their quarterback, but they lost to a D2 school the week before. I mean, they're just overmatched. Isn't even the word to describe what they ran into in Army. So, you know,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, of course, we got a nice dose of rat poison after this game with Isaiah Alston being on the PFF college team of the week on just 3 catches. So I love to see it, but it's rat poison, like Nick Saban would say. Can't have that rat poison. But going on to a much tougher opponent later this year. This is a topic that you wanted to talk about with later on. I mean, I didn't realize it, but I guess every single one of our games, but the LSU game is I mean designated by a television network, which is actually like pretty tidy and impressive at this early in the season to know where and when for the most part you're going to be on TV. Which just leaves the LSU game to be a mystery. Which I'll have to check LSU's schedule, which I do believe that is before Alabama. So we'd still probably be looking at a one-loss LSU team, which wouldn't hurt. Let's see. Yeah, that game is actually the week before Alabama, but LSU has a bye week in between Army and Alabama. But I I guess where would you see Army LSU being? Do you see it being designated to a conference network? Do you see it getting a big ESPN treatment maybe early in the day or
um, so I think it'd be tricky to do early in the day, regardless, just because it's LSU and they're going to be, I presume, a one-loss LSU coming in. If Army had been able to beat ULM, even if it was an ugly win, let's say we beat ULM and it's an ugly win, and then obviously we roll over Dell State, and then if we can take care of UTSA, and then let's say we beat Syracuse. I mean, if in an alternate reality, if we came into this game and Army was undefeated, having beaten Syracuse and Boston College and the rest, and LSU was a one loss, I could, this wouldn't be the game of the week, but I could see this getting much more fanfare. I'm worried that Army's loss to ULM means that unless things just really start firing on all cylinders and we win the next few games by, 28 to 35 each, we will be relegated to who knows what. I mean, I would be fine if we were on the SEC network. The SEC network, I don't know what the ratings are, but I married into an SEC family, and I know that when you have multiple games on a Saturday, one of those channels is always on the SEC network. So I know it's going to get a lot of fans. Obviously, LSU, they themselves are just going to bring in a lot of fans. So I would be ecstatic if we could get the SEC network. The real question is how how low is ESPN willing to put this game? Is my that's my concern. Is that it doesn't matter how well we do, doesn't matter what our record is, it doesn't matter what we're looking like. LSU's going to come in with one loss, and ESPN is going to say, "Boy, if we could put this on ESPN Plus, we would." But we've got LSU, so I would bet we're going to be on the SEC network, but I don't know. I don't know because if we if we go 1-2 in our next two games, or maybe 2-1, and we come in at 3-2, it's like we're not getting any street cred. We're not getting any. Nobody's opening doors for a 3-2 Army team, let alone a 2-3 Army team. So we're on ESPN proper this week. It's a Friday night game, which is kind of weird, but I'm pumped that we're on ESPN proper. So you know, I will ultimately be happy with wherever we land. The question is just going to be, how much does ESPN believe in Army and their ability to draw? Or does that even matter? Because relative to LSU, we could be undefeated and blowing teams out by 60, and our viewership is still going to pale in comparison to a 500 LSU team.
I think that's a good point. I think LSU is definitely gonna be the driver here, and like I'm looking way ahead to the slate on October 21st, and there are some blockbusters. So I'm afraid like this game definitely it seems destined for uh SEC Network, ESPNU, maybe best case scenario. Because
Ugh.
just looking at the
I'd
schedule,
much rather have SEC Network than ESPNU.
okay. I mean, I feel it's kind of an even kind of I guess even destination. So you like pick your poison there with that network. But the October 21st slate is Utah, USC, Penn State, Ohio State, Tennessee, Alabama, Washington State, Oregon, and I mean that's like not even counting the games where there's potential for other teams to come in ranked, and it's not even looking at the group of five slate. Well, I mean, which the networks don't care about the group of five. Who am I kidding? No, I mean I care. They care.
Well,
They don't care though.
and it's interesting too. So how do you watch your games through YouTube, right? YouTube TV.
Right. Yep.
So I'm a Spectrum customer. I have cable. I mean, I don't have a cable box, but I'm a Charter Spectrum whatever. Thank goodness that got resolved, because if ESPN was still pulling their programming right now, I would be getting on the phone probably to somebody like Frontier and saying, I want Frontier and I want YouTube TV and I want Spectrum out of here because I'm not missing this game Friday night. Um, and it's interesting because so my cable package, I don't get ESPNU unless I pay the
Oh, okay.
extra sport package, whatever it is. But SEC Network, I get automatically. And that's just like the way Spectrum has it. Maybe that's a thing in Florida. Maybe that's my region. I don't know how it works. So if I'm looking at those two networks, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, SEC Network is going to have, better coverage, more households, more eyes, more casual viewers than ESPNU will. But I have nothing to base that off of. That's just my anecdotal experience.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm surprised to hear that because I guess as long as I've been a YouTube TV customer, like you get all the ESPN networks, even I guess even the SEC network. Just when I was in New York in college, you got the SEC network too. So like every single ESPN network was part of the bundle for YouTube TV, which I think it's interesting too. I guess ESPNU because I felt that ESPNU being older and not having a regional basis like the SEC network would give it more carriage. So that's definitely interesting to hear. Which like I mean, yeah, like you say, like for fans in the region, for fans like that'll watch in like Louisiana, Texas, I guess all throughout the SEC's footprint, which is pretty much the whole deep South. The SEC network is better. I mean, after hearing that.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, I'll tell you, I've said it a million times. I married into an Alabama family. Both my in-laws went to the University of Alabama. My uncle-in-law went to the University of Alabama. Every Saturday, everybody's in crimson and I'm in black, and that's just the way it goes. Um, and based on my experiences with them, it's sort of like you got the big games of the week on, whatever's on ESPN or ABC or CBS. Obviously, prior to this year, when CBS had the 3:30 SEC game of the week. That was obviously on the big screen, and then the SEC network was always on a secondary screen because it was always going to be Old Miss or Mississippi State or whoever, Kentucky, and it's always for the diehard fans of the power SEC programs. Every other SEC game is really, really significant because if you got whatever Old Miss in 2 weeks, it's important to know how they play against whoever it is they've got this week. So, I would feel like the SEC network is probably the best we can hope for realistically, and I think actually it is a good landing spot.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree because like you say, like it's like the dedicated fans where it's like I'm not sure how many ACC fans are watching the ACC network because the ACC is, I mean, almost it's not as great a football conference as SEC is. I mean, I don't need to tell you or anyone, but I just don't think the dedication's there. Like you just looking at some of the fan bases. I know. Last week, just like being having Holy Cross as my second team, I know like there was a lot of trash spoken on Twitter about how Boston College fans were checked out, how this was a Super Bowl for Holy Cross fans, and like Boston College fans let Holy Cross fans disrespect them in their place. So that's kind of the image I get for like a lot of teams. Like, I mean, honestly, it's like I feel like it's a lot of the Northeast teams. Like, I don't want to pick on the Northeast, as Army is a Northeast team, but I think about Pitt playing at Heinz Field, where it's like they're not filling Heinz Field unless it's like the backyard brawl if it's a Penn State. I think about Miami too. Miami playing also in the Dolphins Stadium, and I mean, they're the subject of many jokes about how people don't come to their games. While like the SEC, like you know, every fan base, right down to like Vanderbilt, is dedicated. So I do agree. I guess that's a long way to say that I do agree that the SEC network and the fans' dedication makes that the best destination for this.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think SEC fans are the types of fans who will have the SEC network on because it's in conference, and it's not that they're necessarily rooting for one team or against another, but more they feel the need to know. They're the type of fan, I need to know what else is going on in the conference at all times. I think that's probably true with the Big Ten. I mean, you can find that in any super fan of any conference, but I think the likelihood of finding that in an SEC fan is much higher than an ACC fan. Like you said, if you are a fan of, let's say, UVA, right, in the ACC, if they're playing on ESPN or ESPN2, I don't think you're then going to have a second TV that's on the ACC network because you're dying to know what happens in the NC State Georgia Tech game. You know what I mean? But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I think too, like you say, I think there'll be a vested interest if the SEC and ESPN plays their cards right. Which, I mean, depending on the whole basis of our discussion is depending or I guess having hope in TV executives. I would hope that they would broadcast the LSU Army game and the Alabama Tennessee game at different times because Alabama's going to want to scout LSU. I mean, with LSU being 2 weeks from that point after the Tennessee game, which increases our audience even more because there's that aspect of, I mean, is LSU looking ahead to Alabama? How does LSU look? Will we be able to get revenge? So, I mean, I think that's something I thought of that adds to your point.
Well, that's the second thing you said that's made me think of the idea of like the college football math, right? And it's like, well, was this team thinking about that game, or is there an emotional hangover from this other game? Those I I actually did a little bit. I went down the rabbit hole a little bit with that idea of the kind of college football math. Looking forward to this week's game against UTSA, and it's sort of like, okay, cool. So UTSA, they lost to sort of an okay Houston team. Houston does not look to be a world beater this year. Not that they are year in, year out, but this year appears to be sort of a middle of the road year for them. But then they beat Texas State, and Texas State, beat Baylor, and that's huge. But the Texas State loss to UTSA, is that an emotional hangover? They had the high of beating the Power Five, of beating Baylor, and then they come in against lowly UTSA and they lay an egg and they end up losing. And then you look at Baylor and it's like, boy, well, Baylor must be real down this year if they lost to Texas State. But then, they played Utah and they played them closer than Florida did. And you think, well, that's because now Utah was coming down off their emotional win of kicking the season off with a big win against an SEC opponent, and you just get into this sort of football math death spiral of all these different variables, and ultimately it's just, let's get the teams on the field and let's play and see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. As someone who's trying to fill out bowl projections week in and week out, this is that definitely something that plays my mind. Where at this point, I'd say my projections don't get serious until mid October, or honestly, when Maction starts in late October, early November. But yeah, like you
Love
say,
Maction.
I know who doesn't? Who doesn't? It's a bit tough here on the western side of the U.S. because Maction starts as my workday ends. So I mean, I miss a good amount of the first half trying to getting back from work. But yeah, like you said, I think UTSA is interesting. That whole like circle that you mentioned is interesting because something else that wasn't. So my honest opinion situation, I try not to pull like into the emotional aspect and everything in these games because I feel like Houston wasn't. I mean, it's an in-state battle, not a high emotion game. And I think I guess for UTSA, I think what we can extrapolate from all those results you mentioned, I think Houston may have a problem because they lost to Rice on the road. I mean, not even. I mean, honestly, Houston may have had more fan support than Rice did at that game because Rice is notorious for having poor fan support. So I think Houston is not a great, or honestly not a good team. So UTSA losing to Houston, I mean, not a great indicator for them. And then also them barely getting by Texas State, which like Texas State, they're not a bad team at all, but UTSA should be beating them, or else like in the preseason, or I guess in the preseason when we were looking at this game, like I think everyone thought UTSA was going to give Tulane a run for their money. Like I know on my calendar, seeing UTSA Tulane on Black Friday, I'm like, wow, that is the game of the year in the AAC. And like now it's just like that might just be a formality, might just be putting the stamp on the paper for Tulane. But I don't know, like
Well, and
it's a lot.
there's a lot of big I know that expectations were very high for UTSA coming into this season. They got Frank Harris, who they were talking about this. Sal and the gang in the post game following Dell State did a little preview about UTSA and Frank Harris, and I think he's in year 7 of college football. I didn't know he was going to medical school, but as I think Chris Farley said, a lot of people go to college for 7 years. But I say that with all due respect to him. I don't. That's not a slight. That's just sort of the funny workings of how the NCAA allows for red shirt years and then medical red shirt years and this and that and then the COVID exceptions. But he's dinged up. He's dinged up. He went down with an injury twice in that game. I don't know what it is. Some lower body something. He was limping around. It's reported that he got an injection at halftime. He finished the game out. Props to him for getting back in there and finishing it out. But if he's got a busted wheel, that might change the trajectory. They're still favored by anywhere from 8.5 to 9.5, depending on what book you're looking at. That line has come down a little bit, whether that's a betting line where people are putting money on one side and that's what's shifting the line, or maybe people are getting cold feet about Frank Harris. I don't know. But even at -8.5, UTSA is still solidly favored in this game. That's more than a touchdown. So if we can pull out a win here, I think it'd be a big win for us. I think it's absolutely doable. I think we're probably going to see a game and play calling. It's going to be less conservative than we played against ULM because now we got a little more experience under us, and I think the coaching staff and I think Drinkle and Thatcher see that we need to be maybe taking a few more chances. But I definitely think we're going to be playing more conservatively than we did against Dell State because the competition is going to be higher, and the risk reward balance is going to be very, very shifted against a team like UTSA.
Yeah, I agree. I think while UTSA hasn't shown it yet this year, I mean that's a team that can put points on the board, and we're gonna have to keep up. Uh, Now, do I think? I mean, while the Delaware State game showed we had the potential to put points on the board quickly in the new system, I don't think that's indicative of us of what we're gonna do like against Delaware State. But I mean, I'm sorry, against UTSA. But I mean, I think there's potential for us to not not be in a hole and not be in a huge hole. Maybe like by a touchdown where it comes down to like us having to drive late in the game, down by 7, maybe like 2 minutes left where, but I mean, I can see it, being in that situation. I mean, I don't think that'll be huge fireworks, but I mean, I do think, I think my score prediction is at least maybe like a 31-20, 31-24, 31-27 type game where it's like there definitely will be points on the board, I think.
Well, some of the concerns I have about this game are because Dell State was so overmatched, there were questions from the ULM game that we were not able to answer,
Right.
specifically about short passes. So because because of the talent gap that existed this past weekend, we didn't really see a chance or have an opportunity to see what our short pass game really looks like because so many pass plays went so long and we were able to really go deep. I mean, obviously Bryson Daly, he was airing it out, 8 for 11, hundreds of yards and touchdowns and the whole thing. That's not showing us what a typical, 2nd and 8 pass play is going to look like. And can we get 6 yards to keep, to get back on schedule and things like that. I was really, really happy to see Tyson Riley playing a little bit. I don't know if he was playing out of the slot or out of the tight end position. I think Josh Lingenfelder was out this past week. And so I think they had slid Tyson Riley into that position. Honestly, before this season started, I had identified Jacoby Buchanan, who I love. And I worry he hasn't really found a place in this offense. He is such a selfless player that I think he's probably fine with that. He's happy to be a team player. As long as we go home with the W, he's going to be just as excited. But in terms of him as a weapon and as a talent, I'd love to see him in the short pass game, whether it's a screen or almost like an option pass where you do the RPO and you put it in the running back's gut and he fakes it up the middle and then you hit Buchanan at the line of scrimmage. I want to see him not in space dancing around. I want him to get the ball with a little bit of space so that he can turn north south and lower his shoulder and bring the boom, because that's what he does. And I think that could be a weapon for us. I haven't seen it yet, but we just got to see how it's going to play out as this offense develops and it comes more into its full flush.
I would agree, and I mean, there's always going to be those. I mean, the players that sort of don't fit into the new scheme, and I mean, I'm thinking back into Jeff Monken's first year, Coach Monken's first year, where he didn't know he had probably. I remember the magazines that year, the Phil Steele magazines were comparing this backfield to the Mr. Inside and Mr. Outside backfields from a statistical perspective, of course, because I think it was like Terry Baggett and Raymond Maples and Larry Dixon all combined, I think, for over 5,000 career rushing yards at that point, if not more. So that was those comparisons being made. But if you look at the guys, I guess the only guy that really fit in cleanly out of those three in that scheme was Larry Dixon, where I mean there was always kind of growing pains with Raymond Maples and Terry Baggett fitting into the scheme. So I think the same thing too with a guy like Buchanan, where I think I'm excited as a running back enthusiast because I feel like the way that we thought about fullbacks in the early or the mid 2000s is the way we think about like running backs nowadays, where it's like, oh, they're a dying breed, like getting like a running back like Audric Estime at a Notre Dame, who I talked about in the other podcast a lot. Just a nice power back, a nice durable power back. I think it's cool that Army's getting back to the days, where we can have a Mike Mayweather. Not that I dislike fullbacks at all, but I think there's something to be said, like the glamour of having a feature back and Army being able to get back to that, I mean, there was a lot of bad things about the Bobby Ross tenure and Stan Brock for that matter. But one good thing was having a back like Carlton Jones, a guy that you can just run toss sweep out of the I formation. And I know we're not running I formation, but just to have a feature back, I'm excited for that prospect.
Um, I love what we're doing, obviously, with our wide receivers. I mean, Isaiah, the game he had was just spectacular, and I think it shows what kind of a weapon he can be. I like to see our previously featured backs, the guys who were hitting the dive, like Tyson Riley, getting the ball in space, catching some passes. I was talking a minute ago about Jacoby. Um, you know, I think we still have a lot of really big things to see from Ijon Marshall. He's obviously had some fumble issues. Coach Monken talked about it in the post game. He talked about it team wide, not just about Ijon, but I think there's a lot of talent there. I don't know when Tyrell Robinson's coming back. I think it's really interesting because um, Tyrell in particular has gotten quite a bit of press this offseason and at the beginning of this season. And I think it's kind of indicative of how many people really follow this team closely and how many people, at least in terms of the media, are just following the team like by the headlines. Because I see lots of stories, or I have seen lots of stories about Tyrell talking about it as though he's going to be back at any moment. And as soon as he steps on the field, it's an absolute game changer. I don't mean to say it won't be a game changer when he is back, but I don't think people are understanding that, he might not be back until LSU. You know what I mean? He missed half of last season. This is a serious injury. And when he comes back, you know, I'm not going to say he's going to be diminished, but we don't know what he's going to be like. So I am looking forward to this offense developing more, the playbook opening, the more snaps we can get for Bryson, the more quarterback experience we can get in the room. I was surprised Dwayne Coleman didn't see any playing time against Dell State. Champ Harris, they put him in, was situational at the end of the first half. I think that's great. And Robinson a little bit later in the game, but I just want to see more snaps, more reps, more experience, because I really do think that this offense can be something great, and we might not see that until the middle of next year. But I think we can really do something with it.
Yeah, 100%. Um, yeah, I think you covered all the bases with the offense. I mean, well, there's a lot of growing pains, a lot of people that, are kind of like square pegs fitting into round holes this time, but that's what this time's for. That's what, and it's great because the administration is backing Coach Monk and everything, and giving him the appropriate time, or I guess the time for the changes to take effect. And we'll see glimpses this year, but hopefully next year, everything will be kicking firing from all cylinders. But that's all I have to say about the various topics. Like last time, we started somewhere, ended up on the opposite end of the map, but I enjoy it.
Hey man, I really appreciate the invite. I always love sitting down and talking with you. I love doing everything I can to just drag the conversation back to Army football, because that's all I really ever want to talk about. I will say real quick, for the Sam Houston Air Force game, I had said that I thought the over under on attendance was going to be 25,000. Ended up being 25,100 and something or other. So I may not have been right, but I Price is righted it. So I was closest without going over. So that's pretty good. Um, but I just wanted to throw that in there because I had that in my show notes ready to roll. But thank you again so much. I always love, getting a chance to chit chat with you about all things college football, man. You're doing great work, and full steam ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Same for you too as well. Just covering Army in depth, as a lot of people are doing, but I really enjoy your takes as well. Especially like the post game threads are great. But yeah, I'm grateful for the flexibility as well, the flexibility and willingness to come on the podcast on short notice. So thank you for that, and I enjoy it as well. The pleasure is mine. Do you have anything final? I know, you always have a not so shameless plug, which
Oh
no,
well,
no plugs, no
listen.
plugs shameless. No plug as shame. There's
Hey,
no plug
listen,
as
shameless self promotion is shameless. It is what it is. You know what I mean? Look me up on SSN Army. The SSN family of Twitter handles are all great. Some of them are better than others, like mine, but whatever. And yeah, go Army, beat UTSA.
exactly. Beat UTSA. Should be electric on a Friday night. I'm excited for this. I love weeknight games. Not when we're hosting them, but when we get to be in front of the country on a Friday night. This is a spotlight game for Army. The ratings should be nice and everything, and against probably, a team that's, I'd say, still a group of five, a New Year's Six contender. We can spoil that though. We can definitely change that. Hopefully Tulane will thank us kindly for doing them that favor. But yeah, our Tulane, or it would probably be another conference. Maybe Troy could thank us, but we play Troy. Never mind. So someone will thank us
We'll
kindly
spoil
if we
them
beat.
too.
Yeah, someone will thank us kindly in kind if we beat UTSA. Who that will be, we don't know. But until next time, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Thanks for listening and watching. Until next time, everyone. Peace, love, and soul.